Hello, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, a show that working vigorously on making the world safe for ADHD. The major premise comes from the whole idea, actually, and it was my personal experiences and my family's experiences with having an ADHD child and knowing that there are tons of people out there who don't know jack about ADHD and don't really think it exists. And I point out every week I am a licensed clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist. I am in private practice. I see a lot of ADHD families. I evaluate adults and children. I'm pretty busy. Let's put it that way. And I see a lot of ADHD. You name it, I've pretty much probably seen it. I made it through an APA-approved graduate program in clinical psychology without ever once hearing about ADHD. When we started noticing some things with my young man, fortunately I was at a postdoc program and was able to talk to some of the faculty in that program and about what might be going on, and they mentioned ADHD then. But that was literally the first time and I'd already been in private practice, or been in practice for 4 or 5 years. We just didn't know much about it, and we weren't taught much about it. And, frankly, a lot of us weren't so sure it actually existed. I mean, I know I had some doubts, frankly. It just sounded like one of those, my kid's too big a problem, or too much energy, or waste my time trying to teach him discipline, so I'm just not going to bother. And maybe the school will do it. I know now that was totally wrong, totally a bad thought, poorly thought out. But the idea was that back in those days we really didn't have a whole lot of information. The treatment approaches were, most of the major ones, stimulants had been around since the 1930s, but some of the stimulant medications hadn't been developed yet. We were kind of pretty much doing Ritalin or Adderall. This is back 30 years, 40 years ago. Nowadays we have way more choices than that. So that's an improvement, and there has been so much more research, and that research has gotten so much better publicized that now we know, we didn't even used to know for sure exactly where ADHD came from. Now we know it's a neurologic condition. We know it's passed down from one generation to the next. We know it has an heritability index of 85%, which is extraordinarily high, meaning basically that if your child has ADHD, you got a lot of people, a lot of relatives, whether they're on your side of the family or your spouse's side of the family, that have got it as well, which may explain why Uncle Leroy just doesn't seem to quite fit in. But I'll leave that up to you and Uncle Leroy to figure out for yourself. But the idea is that it is inherited. It has got nothing to do with what mom does during the pregnancy. If she eats jelly donuts, it doesn't matter. That isn't what causes it. Sugar doesn't cause it. Mom's behavior during the pregnancy doesn't cause it. It's inherited. It's at the moment of conception, that's when it starts. Okay? And that leads us to what I wanted to talk about today. I see an extreme in people who treat ADHD, who write about ADHD, some who have ADHD, some who are just, treating it or evaluating it. I mean, the main thing, there are two extremes, okay? We've got the sort of victim model, which is, this is a terrible, debilitating disability, and it's really too bad that you've got it, and we're going to do all this extra stuff in school to help you out, but it's going to be tough, okay? And the other side of the house is sort of, and I think these are well-meaning folks who are, trying to soften the blow, if you will, make it more, make it more palatable, or make it so people don't give up, I guess. Something when they start talking about all these wonderful things that happen because you've got ADHD, how you're going to be a brilliant entrepreneur, and how your outside the box thinking is so great that it's going to be perfect for being a businessman, and that there are these superpowers that you have because you've got ADHD, and it's just a matter of learning how to use them, and let's just say that while I think that's well-meaning, I think that's overstated, but on the other hand, I think the whole victim thing is overstated as well. There are lots of people in the world who are successful physicians, psychiatrists, lawyers, businessmen, even some accountants, which I would think that would be the worst job in the world to be in if you were had ADHD, but there are some that are like that. And they succeeded despite having ADHD, and then there are lots of folks who are total failures, and they can blame it on ADHD if they want to, but it's a little more complicated than that. And basically what I'm here about today is I think people need to have a balanced perspective on having ADHD or having a child with ADHD. Yeah, in some cases, in some situations, it's going to be tougher, okay? Some school systems, it'll be tougher. Some teachers within school systems, it'll be tougher. And then there'll be other folks, other teachers, other school systems that get it, that are a little more, I think, forward-thinking, and a little less do it my way or the highway kind of folks. And a lot of times education's not that big an issue. I mean, yeah, there'll still be some behavior things, but not a steady diet. So, for some people it's like, I don't he's got ADHD, but I don't know, it wasn't that big a deal. What's that? Well, for some people it is that big a deal. They're in, for one thing, ADHD, it sounds like one thing, but it's kind of a range of problems. You can have a little bit of it, or you can have a whole bunch of it. And if you've got a whole bunch of it, you're going to have more troubles than if you've just got a little bit of it. Usually. I mean, the good thing about having a whole bunch of it is everybody recognizes what's going on, and you get treatment earlier. If you've just got a little bit of it, a lot of times people don't notice it until you get, way up in middle school or high school. Then it'll frequently show up. Or sometimes it doesn't show up till you get into college. I mean, you've always had the problem, but you've known how to compensate for it enough that you could get by. And usually these are folks that are also a little brighter than average, so they adapt a little better and have slightly less difficulties because their control of attention and executive stuff is not so great. But it's still a big issue eventually. I mean, I do a lot of adults ADHD evals, and those are the ones that I really feel for. is folks that have usually somebody somewhere along the line, a doctor, a teacher, a neighbor, somebody tried to convince the parents that there was something not quite working well with this child, and maybe it was ADHD, and it either never, oh, not my kid, or you got a very defensive response, or you got a very oh well maybe, but a wimpy response. And either way, the kid didn't get evaluated, didn't get treated, and now the kid is an adult, and he or she's in her 30s, or well, usually it's in the 30s. That's where I get most of mine. Early 30s, late 20s even, and they're getting sick of losing jobs and not being able to sustain relationships, and on and on and on. So that's when I get them, and it's they have lost a lot of time that they didn't need to lose. It's just anybody who thinks that they're doing their kid a favor by not putting them on medication really needs to stop and think about that. Medication is because there's a problem, and the medication is given over and over again by all different prescribers because it works. How much more complicated do we need to make it? It's not a complicated problem. And all of this stuff, ADHD is not a belief system, and I start grinding my teeth when somebody says to me, looks me right in the eye and says, I don't believe in ADHD. Just think, excuse me, ADHD has been described in medical literature since 1760 something. It has been treated with medication since 1930 something. It's not a belief system. It's not a religious question. The scientific facts are that this stuff exists and there are treatments for it. And if you don't treat it, the repercussions are more serious. Well, they're serious. Let's put it that way. I remember one young adult, a guy, he was doing some kind of mechanic's job. He started getting into trouble in elementary school, and by the time he was in middle school, they'd already planned a different path for him than going through regular school. So he was always in the special kids, special academy, and he never graduated. He didn't even come close to graduating from high school. And now he's in a dead-end job, and he's kind of miserable, and he doesn't exactly know what he did wrong exactly. He tries to be kind of tough, but he's not really tough. He's like 5'6" and 135 pounds soaking wet. So he's not exactly going to terrify people. And he's not really a tough guy. He's basically a real depressed guy. And it's all could have been. It's so could have been different for him. And now we're trying to catch up. And I don't know if we're going to make it or not. He's got 30 plus years of learning that he's worthless and he can't do what the other kids could do, and he, maybe he's stupid, and all those other things that ADHDers get when they have troubles in the standard classroom. And they're having troubles not because they don't have intelligence, but it's without control of attention and executive functioning, you can't apply intelligence. You can't sit still long enough to learn something. Anyway, so the thing for parents, though, and the thing for folks who have ADHD, is to have a balanced look at it, a balanced perspective when you're discussing it. It is neither the greatest gift in the world nor the biggest deficit in the world. It is neither one of those. It's one of those things in life you've got to figure out You got to accept what you got and figure out what you're going to do about it. And that's, we all have to do that. The folks who can't do that, who are probably the hardest ones, are the ones who are victims. You know, they're professional victims. And that is a hard one to get out of, because by definition, if you're a victim, you're not in control. Somebody else is in control. You know, they did this to me, and they're going to keep doing it to me, and you're right, because you're going to let them. So victim is a very weak position to raise your kid in, and it's a very weak position for your child to try to be an adult in, because there are always them out there. We all have them out there. But if you just say ADHD, that's one of the things I have to deal with. You know, it's like having celiac disease and I can't eat gluten, or if it's like having allergies and I, can't eat lemons or citrus fruit, or it's just a thing. It's makes certain things in life uncomfortable or more difficult, but you can still figure ways to get to where you want to go. And that's what you have to teach your kids, is that they can handle this. They are resilient. They can figure out ways to get around all the problems. And I don't mean get out of dealing with it. I mean get around to the successful conclusion in that sense, okay? So your child needs to accept that this is what you got. It isn't a terrible, horrible, awful thing, and it isn't a great gift either. It's a mixed blessing. It's, you get a little bit of good stuff from it. You get a little bit of bad stuff from it. You got to learn how to compensate for the bad stuff and make the maximum usage you can out of the good stuff. Okay? And while I don't necessarily believe that there's an ADHD superpower, I think there are some things that ADHDers are better at than folks without ADHD. But not every ADHDer probably has that ability. So, mixed blessing. Have a balanced approach to it. Accept it. Learn how to adapt and adjust to it. And never give up. Keep mushing along. Keep going. Something doesn't work, try something else. But don't start dismissing things out of hand. Oh, this doesn't work. Or probably the worst thing you can get is a lot of the advice you get from friends and other people who are in situations close to yours. You want to listen to other people, but don't just take that their experience is the way it's going to be for everybody, because it's not. I think one of the myths we have in medical care is that everybody's got the same body, same equipment, and it's no. There are all kinds of individual differences. So what doesn't work for your neighbor's kid may work for your kid. Just be a scientist about it. Be objective about it. Evaluate stuff objectively. And be careful with Google. Please be careful with Google. Because there's a lot of hooey on Google. There's a lot of good stuff too, but you got to know how to tease it out. Okay, that is a bit of a harangue from me, but I think it's a real important thing for you to, you read some books and you'll be thinking, where's this superpower? I don't remember. I haven't seen that, And on the other hand, it's some people will make you really depressed about it, about ADHD. Get in the middle. Yeah, it's not a great thing, but on the other hand, it's not the worst thing in the world. Okay? Alrighty. I'm Terry James Gingrass. I am a clinical clinical neuropsychologist in private practice. I am also the parent of an ADHD adult, and I am guilty of making about every mistake you can make in raising an ADHD child. I freely admit that, and I will also say that it was totally because of almost complete ignorance at the time, okay? I'd do much better if I had it to do over again. Okay, we will catch you next week. I say that, but I'm not sure we will do it next week. We do have, I have a conference coming up, but we will talk about that in the future. Okay, catch you next time. This is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, the show to make the world safe for ADHD. Because remember, ADHDers tend to be outside the box thinkers, and outside the box thinkers are the folks who change the world. Okay, catch you next time. And if you've got questions or anything, somewhere down below there's a place to do that. Or if you've got other things you think I should talk about, let me know. Okay, see ya.